Hello and welcome to the section 8.4 lecture today. I'm going to go ahead and start this one off by saying we've been a little spoiled with the length of the videos lately, and sadly this one might be a little bit longer. So I apologize if I can't get it done in 5 minutes. Okay. Today we're looking at standard form, which is, and we've talked about this before when we were working on finding slope in standard form, and today we're not really going to use that same strategy. I'm not as concerned about the slope in standard form because I use a different method. It's called the cover-up method. And it's a way that I can cover up a variable, and I usually don't cross it out like this. I can do it because it's easy to erase here. But I'll use like my finger. If I'm looking at it on paper, I'll use my finger. I might use the eraser of my pencil and just kind of read it to myself. But the basics of it are, we will cover up the, let's just set an order. Sorry. The x term and solve for y. And this is going to give us our y-intercept. And then I'm going to repeat that process. I'm going to cover up, let's say then, cover up the y term and solve for x. That's going to give me my x-intercept. Now the reason this works is it's like putting a 0 in for the term that we're covering up. When we put a 0 in somewhere, we're figuring out what the other coordinate is when the one that we're covering up is 0. Okay? So most of the time, like I said, I'm not going to cross it out. I'm not going to scratch it out because I need to see it again eventually. Okay? So on here, I like to use a little trick. Where I'm going to cover up the x term. Okay, so I'm going to cover up that x term and I get 2y equals 6. And I'm just going to rewrite that because I don't want to mess it up. But I'm going to divide both sides by 2 to solve this for y. And we get y equals 3. Now that tells me that that is my y-intercept. Positive 3. Then I'm going to go back to my original equation and cover up the y term. So notice some specifics. When I covered up the x term, I didn't cover up that sign because if it's a negative, I need to know that it's a negative. And so when I cover up the y term, I am going to cover up that sign because if I don't, then I get 3 plus equals 6. That seems weird. Okay, so cover up the sign and I get 3x equals 6. And I'll solve it for x, dividing by 3. And I get x is equal to 2. And that's my x-intercept. And then it's graphing knowing the two intercepts. So my x-intercept is 2, my y-intercept is 3, and I can graph my line. I'm going to do it this way. And there I have my line graphed. Not too bad. Okay, but standard form is typically a difficult way to graph lines. Okay. Now, there are some quick little tips, and I mentioned this when we were finding slope in standard form, that there is a quick tip. I usually don't like talking about it, though, because I'm not a big fan of the, well, you've got to memorize this type of strategy. I don't want to have to memorize things, okay? But after doing this so many times, I start to see a pattern. And that is that when I cover up x, I get by equals c. right? And so every time I cover up x, I get by equals c, no matter what it is, okay? No matter what b and c are. And then every time I divide both sides by b. And so I get every time that y is equal to whatever c divided by b is. So the y-intercept is always c divided by b. And that's kind of the quick key that I have, that the y-intercept is always b over c. And you can use that. If you're the kind of person that likes to memorize things, feel free to use that trick. The same thing happens with the x, that every time it's a times x equals c. And then I would divide both sides by a. I just wrote that wrong. Sorry. How about c over b? And so when I solve it for the x-intercept, it's always c over a. And now that can make things go a little bit quicker. So if I'm doing this problem here, my x-intercept is always going to be 112 over 7. Now I need to know what that is. It's 16. And if I cover up the x, or if I just use my quick key, my y-intercept is 112 over negative 8, because that 8 is negative. So I didn't put the negative in there, but I'm going to get a negative 14 for this one. All right, and that can make things go a little bit quicker. All right, so let's go ahead and give that a shot, just on finding x and y intercepts. The x-intercept, 0 over the number in front of x1, well, that's 0. And the y-intercept, 0 over 1 is also 0. No matter what, when you get a line that has an x-intercept of 0, it's guaranteed that a y-intercept is 0 also. Okay, that has to happen. So getting x and y-intercepts of 0 is actually a bad sign. Usually when we get 0, it's like, okay, cool. I know where 0 is at. I can use that. But in graphing in standard form, when you get x and y intercepts at 0, that's actually a bad sign, because that means I'm going to have to do more work. Think about it. That graph, all I know is that the x and y intercept is 0. I don't know which line it is that goes through 0, though. So I'd have to do some more work on that one. Most of the other time, though, it's going to give us some good information. The x-intercept is going to be negative 6 over covering up y over 1, which is negative 6. The y-intercept, when I cover up x, is going to be negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. Sometimes in standard form, they don't give us nice numbers. The x-intercept on this one, negative 12 over 7, that's probably about as good as I can do. I could come up with a decimal, but it's a pretty ugly decimal. It's like negative 1.142857. That's going to be 1 point, probably, I want to say 714 and some other stuff. Okay, I could just grab a calculator, but I don't want to. Y-intercept is going to be negative 12 over negative 4. That one works out. That gives us 3. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. This does work out. I could graph this, but I would be guessing a little bit. All right, on these ones, I want to find the x and y intercepts and then graph the equation. On the first one, the x-intercept comes from 1 over 2, so it's 1/2. That's actually not that great of an x-intercept. The y-intercept comes from 1 over 1, so it's 1. Those 2 points are pretty close together. I could try to extend them a little bit farther. And it turns out that for every 2 I go down, I go over 1. So I sort of get a made up slope. Oops, that's not what I want to do. I want to graph a line. Let me graph a line. Let's go. And just tweak it a little bit to get it through those points. The next one, the x-intercept comes from covering up y. And I get negative 10 over 2. Negative 10 over 2, which is negative 5. The y-intercept I get from covering up x, negative 10 over 5, which is negative 2. So I have an x-intercept at negative 5, y-intercept at negative 2, and I can graph my line. So you see that we're using skills that we've worked on already, graphing with the intercepts. I get the x-intercept on the next one from covering up y. It says x equals 5, and I'm good to go. If I cover up x, I get negative y equals 5, which means the y-intercept is negative 5. So I get a y-intercept at negative 5, x-intercept at positive 5, and I can graph my line. And there we go. Go ahead and pause the video and give these 3 a shot. Hopefully I had a chance to do that. Let's get right into it. You should have gotten on the first one here that the x-intercept is 4 and the y-intercept is negative 2. So we get 4 and negative 2, and we can graph that line. I'll try to make them a little bit quicker here. Next one, you should have an x-intercept at negative 1 and a y-intercept at 4. X-intercept negative 1, y-intercept at 4. And we get a line about there. That's not too good. I think you can do better. Last one should get an x-intercept at 4 and a y-intercept at something ugly, negative 4/3 or maybe negative 1.3, repeating. So you should get, so that one's a little bit ugly. We're just going to do our best. X-intercept at 4. Y-intercept at negative 1 1/3, a little bit below 1. And let's try that one again. Something about there. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about are horizontal and vertical lines because they do show up. For horizontal lines, they look like an equation y equals a number, so there is no x involved. So we'd get something like y equals negative 3. This really comes from slope-intercept form is what it comes from, is that it's y equals 0 times x minus 3 would be this equation. So it has a slope of 0. That's one of the only ways that I've learned to remember it, is that there is no x. There's a 0x. So my slope is 0. Okay. On the other one, there is no good way to learn it other than it's not y equals a number. It's a vertical line at x equals a number. So another way that I kind of think of it, go to x equals 4, put a point, draw a line the other way. Right? I moved to x equals 4 horizontally, so then my line has to go the other way. That would work here too. Start at the origin, move to y equals negative 3, put a point, draw a line the other way. Okay, horizontal and vertical lines are, I'm going to say they're so easy that they're difficult, right, to know which one's which. Okay? Anyways, put any questions you have over on the left. Make sure you put them in the response to this assignment. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you in class.